Effective communication is both an art and a science. Mastering the art of delivering a memorable message is really easy. But in 1987, I mastered a nonverbal communication tactic that allowed me to communicate thoughts, ideas, and emotions with astounding accuracy. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and at the age of 3 years old, I mastered the side eye. Oh yeah, it is the unequivocal, unmistakable signal for distrust, disgust, and skepticism. I was very impressed with myself to communicate all that with one simple look. I wish it was still that easy to get my point across, but now I have facts and figures and bar graphs to contend with. And I bet you do too. And the reality is, a lot of the time our audiences really don't know what we're talking about or what we even mean. It's the central challenge that leaders face when it comes to communication. Number one, people have short attention spans. Have you noticed that? You see that goldfish up there? His name is Lyle, and I promise you, he has a longer attention span than most of the people you interact with on a daily basis. Not only that, people often don't even understand what we're talking about. Now, they might not tell you that. Yeah, they're looking at you and gazing and smiling politely, but inwardly, the thought bubble above their head is just a big question mark, and their inner side eye is ready to rear its ugly head. And on top of all that, sometimes people just don't care. We're under the impression that just because our lips are moving, that people care about the words that are coming out of our mouth, and it's just not always true. In fact, research says that only 29% of employees believe that their leaders effectively communicate their goals and plans. Only 29%? And I know that's not from lack of trying, but I believe we just don't have the right strategy. I believe it's time to shake things up. It's time to challenge and change the status quo. We have to find a way to be able to communicate consistently in a way that can get us alignment and create synergy, in a way that can improve meeting productivity and make decisions faster for us, in a way that will allow us to cultivate engaged and inspired teams and foster collaboration, and perhaps most important, something that will allow us to effectively communicate our purpose. So the way I see it, we have two options. A, we can continue with the conventional rhetoric we're all used to and maybe use shorter words or shorter sentences and hope for the best. Or we can embrace something new. We can elevate our communication and educate and inspire and persuade like never before with the power of story. Story is proven to be one of the most powerful forces on the planet to connect, persuade, and inspire. Psychologist Jerome Bruner discovered that facts are 20 times more likely to be remembered if they're part of a story. Not only that, neuroscience research out of Princeton University shows us there's a powerful connection between a storyteller and a story listener. As you listen to a story, your brain waves start to synchronize with those of the storyteller. It brings a whole new meaning to the idea of getting on the same wavelength. And in my opinion, here's the best part of all. Stories are proven to affect behavior. For example, we can look at the healthcare context. Melanie Green out of the University of Buffalo discovered that as it relates to lifestyle and health habits, people are much more likely to change if they see a character they relate to making the same change. Now, lest you think I'm suggesting that you start your next staff meeting with your most rousing rendition of Little Red Riding Hood, don't do that. Allow me to define what I mean by story. A story is the skillful organization of data points into a cohesive narrative that conveys a central theme. It offers both knowledge and motivation for action. That was a mouthful. How about I say that one more time? A story is the skillful organization of data points into a cohesive narrative that conveys a central theme. It offers both knowledge and motivation for action. Stories invite us to synthesize our ideas, to maximize impact both now and in the future to come. Steve Jobs says, The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation that is to come. Today, my goal is simple. I want to make a storyteller out of you. I want to show you a framework, a way of thinking that no matter what your role, discipline, or function might be, it will make you a more influential, more persuasive, more effective leader. I don't care if you work in marketing or HR or sales or finance. If you implement the 5 keys that we're getting ready to go through, I believe that you will see marked success in your day-to-day interaction. So let's get into it. You ready? I hope so. Let's get into it. Number 1, self-interest. Self-interest. You remember a few minutes ago I said sometimes you're talking and nobody cares about what you're talking about? So the first job of any storyteller is to make them care about what you're talking about. So what's the easiest way to make them care? It's probably to talk about what they care about. What do people care about? Themselves. And it's not because they're arrogant and self-centered. It's just human nature. You and I, and every audience you will ever be before, processes information based on their own worldview, their own paradigm, their own events, their own perspective. And so if you're going to reach them, you have to speak to it. And so if you haven't thought that through, you will miss the mark before you even start. And so before we put pen to paper or finger to keyboard to craft the message, there are a few important questions we've got to think about. Number 1, who is your audience? Who is your audience? Now do me a favor. Don't go generic on me. Don't go internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. I don't have time for that. That's too broad to be actionable. Instead, you want to segment your audience as much as possible and get really clear on what their interests are and priorities and segment them that way. Then specifically look at what are they interested in? What do they value? What challenges are they experiencing? And then you can craft your message around that. Also think about how do they perceive you? Do you have trust with this audience? Do you have credibility? If not, you can think through those gaps and then tailor your message to speak to those possible objections. So you want to think about who is your audience, but number 2, you want to think about what do you want them to do? Stories are not just about sharing information. They are about creating transformation. They are about prompting action. So this seems very elementary. What do you want them to do? But I've seen many teams miss the mark because they haven't outright declared the goal. So what do you want your audience to do? I want you to take a look at this list of thought starters. When you think about prompting action, what do you want your audience to do? Do you want them to accept, believe, invest, persuade? There's so many options, but once you find that, now you can create a message that is around that end goal. It's just like what Stephen Covey taught us in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? When he said, begin with the end in mind. Yeah, I'll say it another way. When it comes to storytelling, define the context before you build the content. So if you're going to be a good storyteller, you have to learn how to build the muscle of seeing life through your audience's self-interest. But that alone, I got to be honest, that alone is not going to make you that good of a storyteller. So in addition to that, number 2, you got to be simple. You've got to master the art of simplicity. Let me ask you this. Do you have anyone in your life who every time they open their mouth, out comes this loaded barrage of facts and details that leaves your mind spinning, and inside you are screaming, oh my God, get to the point before my head pops off my body? Giving lots of details can show your depth of knowledge. It can show attention to detail, but it also confuses people. And do you know what a confused mind does? Nothing. So instead of a everything but the kitchen sink approach to communication, stories require us to make it simple and only focus on the most crucial elements. But it raises the question, what does simple mean? Does it mean short and sweet? Does it mean clever sound bites and then you get out of there like a politician or something? Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. Simple messages have 3 characteristics. They are core, they are compact, and they are concrete. Let's break it down one by one. They are core. We can look to the world of military strategy to understand this concept. In the 1980s, the US Army developed the idea of commander's intent to deal with all the unpredictability of battle. Instead of trying to detail out every single scenario that could take place, leaders started to put a commander's intent at the top of the order. It's a concise statement that communicates the purpose, the ultimate goal. Commander's intent says, out of all the details in the world, this is the main idea. In their book, Made to Stick, Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die, authors Dan and Chip Heath suggest that we can find the core of our own ideas by creating our own commander's intent. So, if you want to do it, all you have to do is think through these 2 prompts. Number 1, if we do nothing else during tomorrow's mission, we must fill in the blank. Number 2, the single most important thing we must do tomorrow is fill in the blank. So that takes us to the second attribute of a simple idea, and that is compact. This is probably what we most readily think of when we think about a simple idea. We think of paring it down and being concise, but a message that resonates is not only compact, it must be compact and core. It must deliver your main idea. For much of its existence, Southwest Airlines has dominated in its industry and performed head and shoulders above its competition. Do you know what its commander's intent is? It is to be the low-fare airline. Now, of course, they value other things, and other things are important to them. But to the exclusion of those things, their core message is about low airfare. Other things are important, but they're not talking about that. It forces prioritization. And on top of that, it's communicated in a compact way, which makes it easier to remember and more powerful. Which leads us to our last bucket here. Simple messages are concrete. Concrete is something that you can perceive with your 5 senses. So I want to give you a little test that you can use to determine whether or not your ideas are concrete. I want to introduce you to the chicken Caesar salad test. Let's turn our attention back once again to Southwest Airlines. Their longest running CEO is Herb Kelleher, and he's quoted as saying the following, giving us a little bit of insight into his leadership philosophy. He says, Tracy from marketing comes into your office. She says, our surveys indicate that people on the flight from Houston to Las Vegas would really enjoy a light entree. Right now, we're just serving peanuts, and I really believe that a chicken Caesar salad would be really popular. What do you say? You say, Tracy, is a chicken Caesar salad going to help me become the lowest airfare airline? If not, then we are not serving any chicken Caesar salad. And so I say, if your idea does not help people determine whether or not they should be serving chicken Caesar salad, then maybe it's not concrete enough. Concrete is the difference between an idea that inspires and brings clarity and guides decision-making and the ones that get stuck in these PowerPoint decks that we spend 2 and 3 weeks working on. Now, next up is structure. I don't know about you, but I'm type A. I love structure. Maybe you're not, but just go with it, okay? All good stories need to have structure. Something that I love to do with teams that I work with is go through the 7 types of storytellers, and everybody gets a kick out of trying to figure out what type of storyteller they are. So first you have the rambler, which doesn't require much explanation. Then you have the riddler, and these are folks with ideas that are so deep and abstract, you're just scratching your head trying to figure out what the heck they're talking about. Then you have the Picasso. Picasso storytellers tell stories like this, where all the pieces are there, but they're just not in the right order, and everything kind of feels all over the place. Effective storytellers know it's not just about the information, it's about the order in which the information is presented. So I want to offer you a structure that you can use that is proven time and time again to be effective in so many classic movies, plays, and books because it just works that you can use to structure your story. So first of all, you want to start off with a setup. This is where you set the scene, you establish context. This is where you want to really lay out your desired outcomes. Really, the goal here is to pique your audience's interest and answer for them, why should I listen? So once you got that down, you move to conflict. Good stories are about contrast and tension. One way you can create that is illustrating the tension between your current state and your future state. This is where you can pile in all your data, all your facts and figures to drive your point home. And then finally, end with your resolution. This is where you're going to have a strong call to action, and you're going to highlight the next steps that are obvious based on the story that you told. Remember, stories about organization and being cohesive, so it's important to take a step back and look at the pieces and see, does this follow setup, conflict, resolution? Are there any shifts I need to make? Bottom line, make sure your message looks like a well-constructed story and not a riddle. All right, we're gonna keep it moving. The next thing that a really good storyteller and communicator knows how to do is share. Stand-up comedian Maria Bamford has a very intriguing practice. She is in the habit of meeting with her fans one by one. And it's not just a habit of goodwill. She likes to test her material to see how it resonates in real life. This practice is not specific to her. A lot of comedians have this practice where they find low-stakes situations, either a small club or a group of friends, to test out the content. They value being able to refine the message and test it and retweak it to make sure that it's as good as it can be. The parallel for communication is clear. So let me ask you, how often are you getting before a test audience to get feedback on your message so that you can tweak it and refine it before it hits the big stage? Remember that effective communication is an iterative process, even for professionals. So how often are you getting before people that are helpful enough and have enough clarity to be helpful to you, but also critical enough to tell you the truth? This practice is often the difference between a message that is remembered and one that is forgotten. But there's another question in regard to sharing that I bet you've thought of a time or two, and it's this: how do I get people to share my message? Like, how do I communicate in such a way that's so compelling that people are raring to tell somebody about it without me even twisting their arm? Well, if you want to create a highly shareable message, remember this mantra: feelings are better than facts. Author Jonah Berger of the book Contagious: Why Things Catch On was very intrigued by this idea of viral content and digital content that gets shared over and over. So he began to research, what are the attributes of digital content that goes viral? What he found is a direct correlation between the emotions that it evokes and the amount of times that it is shared. Specifically, content that arouses our psychological arousal tends to be shared. It kindles the fire of an audience. High arousal emotions are the type that get you going. It's kind of like the feelings before you give a big speech or before you score the winning game at a basketball game. So you can conjure this with your audience through high arousal emotions, such as awe, excitement, or amusement, or on the negative side, anger, anxiety. On the flip side, emotions like contentment and sadness have the opposite effect and typically aren't shared as much. So the bottom line is, sometimes we gotta learn to stop harping on features and facts and get in there and focus on the feelings. Now, I can almost literally hear it, what some of you are thinking. That's all well and good, but I can assure you there is no emotion in the work that I do. I would argue there's emotion everywhere, and your message gets elevated when you're able to tap into it. In the book Made to Stick that I mentioned earlier, one of the tactics to find the emotion, even in the most unemotional things, is the 3 whys. It's pretty simple. You start with your idea, and then you ask, why is it important 3 times? And you drill down and you drill down, and eventually you get to the core. So take, for example, a Google search. That doesn't feel very emotional, but if I keep asking why is it important, eventually I will get to, people want quick information because they want to connect with people, they want to meet their goals, they want to have a good future. And there's emotion in that. So in order to be a good storyteller, you got to figure out how to get into that emotional core to get people geared up and fired up about your message. Well, we have reached our final stop, and it is space. The last thing that a great storyteller knows that they need is space. I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you are on a journey. You are on a journey to become an effective storyteller. You want to be the kind of communicator that people just eat out of your hand. They just can't wait to hear every single thing that you have to say. So you begin to assemble your facts and your figures and your numbers and your encyclopedias and all the things. And you realize there is still such a big gulf between you and where you're trying to go. And you realize that the stakes are high because beneath your feet is an angry, raging ocean that is ready and willing to suck up any brilliant but poorly communicated ideas that come within its path. So what do? It feels really discouraging. So what in the world do you do? Lucky for you, there's a bridge, and it's called time. It takes time and space to think critically and analytically. It takes time and space to really figure out what is my audience's true self-interest. It takes time and space to craft a message that is simple and structured and not convoluted and Picasso-like. This stuff doesn't happen overnight, and so often we are going so fast that we fall between that little crack there, and all our work and all our hard effort is going down the drain. So we need to make space. We need to make time to be strategic, to be storytellers. And so, here's my charge to you. When you leave here, I want you to be bold. I want you to be crazy. I want you to be wild. I want you to go back within the four walls of your company and be a storyteller. First, by slowing down sometimes. Slow down enough to help you and others define the context and to align on goals, because this is the fertile soil that good stories grow in. Not only that, I challenge you to challenge the status quo. I think it might be time to scrutinize our meeting agendas, our projects, proposals, even presentation templates to ask ourselves, are we telling stories? Are we just settling for the facts? Because I believe if we're going to make long-term impact, if you and I are going to courageously live out our purpose both personally and professionally, facts and figures aren't going to do it. We need stories. We need tales of transformation. We need pictures of possibility. If we're going to transfer the heartbeat of our purpose from one heart to another, we need a story. We need to be able to see and communicate not just who we are, but who we could become, so that everyone gets it, so that the heart of our purpose is not lost in translation, so that years from now we can look back and trust that our legacy is in good hands because we did the work right now. Because after all, everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Thank you.
Thank you.